I am so excited to be here to talk about this very important topic. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to get right into it. You know, both of you are the chief law enforcement officers in your state. At what point did you sort of recognize that second chance employment and law enforcement kind of go hand in hand? Kathy, you first.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and for inviting us to be here. I have the honor to be on this panel with Pennsylvania's Attorney General Dave Sunday, the second best state in the country. And so, to answer your question, thank you, Kimberly. I come from a background where when I started to practice law, it was as a prosecutor in the Department of Justice that is in the Attorney General's office, because we have full criminal jurisdiction. And so I knew a couple things. I wanted to be in criminal law because to me it was fascinating, the issues that we deal with and the concept of justice and fairness. And at the same time, definitely wanted to be in the courtroom. And so the combination of events led me to the Attorney General's office. But what I realized over the years is that all the work we do in the justice system to hold people accountable, and that's always going to be our primary function, right? To do justice, to make sure that the public is safe, and at the same time, to recognize what our constitutional obligations are as prosecutors, and to find ways to solve problems. What I have noticed over the many years that I was a prosecutor, and also over the years that I was a defense attorney representing people accused of crime, is that unless we have a broader view of the justice system, it's a little bit like being Sisyphus. You're rolling the boulder up the hill and it's coming right back down again, unless you can get to more of the root causes. Why is recidivism so high? Why is our prison population so overwhelming all of the time? Does it need to be? How can we make a difference in the bigger picture? And so that's how I became very involved with second chances. We'll have a chance to talk about what our office did about it, what I've been able to do about it. But frankly, you're a big part of it as well. And I know this, we can reduce violent crime, and we have. We can reduce our prison population, and we have. We can reduce the recidivism rate, which in Delaware is defined as being sent back to prison within 3 years of leaving prison. And we have reduced the recidivism rate. All outstanding measures of success. But our work is truly never done. And so if we're not getting at the root causes, if we're not giving people who deserve a chance after they've been held accountable to get into the workforce, to take care of their families, and to lead happy and productive lives, then we haven't done our jobs. So that's what brings me here today.
So it's wonderful to be here, first of all. And what brings me here is a little bit different, but similar, and that is when I was, a long time ago, before I was the Attorney General, I was a kid and I was an absolute knucklehead. I had next to no discipline, and because of that, when I turned 18, I joined the Navy to go find discipline. I was enlisted. I came back from the military, and then I needed to work, and so I started working at UPS. I ended up staying at UPS for 8 years, and so I worked at UPS all through undergrad, and then I worked at UPS during the day while I went to law school at night. And while I was at UPS, I worked with some of the absolute hardest working humans you could ever imagine. And a lot of these individuals, men and women, started out a little rough in life. And I worked with people that were on probation, parole, work release, and I will never forget, and it's interesting because a lot of my criminal justice policies are an outgrowth of that experience I had in the military and at UPS. And so I worked with people who started out a little bit shaky, but magic happens when people work. I will never forget it. I mean, when people realize that they have the power within themselves to change their lives, you can just see everything change. And I saw people that barely could function end up getting promoted, becoming unbelievably successful humans, taking care of their families, and just living amazing, wonderful lives. I never forgot that. And then throughout my career as a prosecutor, because I was a district attorney before I became the Attorney General, we started implementing initiatives to get this done. I mean, 95% of everyone that goes to prison is coming back out. And so as a society, what do we want to have happen? And so we immediately, I started working with our local chamber, with the Manufacturers Association, anyone I could find that would be willing to hire someone when they came out of prison. And that ultimately culminated in what we created, a reentry opportunity center in our jail. And so the whole process for reentry started then. That involves interviews. It involves all the wraparound services that come with it. And so we were able to decrease our we were able to decrease our prison population by over 40%. And we directly attribute a lot of this work with reentry to it. I think that reentry and employment is the absolute total key to victory. I think it's a win-win for everyone. And that's why now as a state attorney general, one of our top priorities in the office is decreasing barriers to reentry and doing everything we can to get people work.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I did want to ask about specifics. So do you want to go on and talk a little bit more about what specifically you're doing in your it's not you.
Okay.
What you're doing in your current role to reduce recidivism and help with reentry?
Sure. So in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is a huge state. We have 67 different counties. That means you have 67 different DAs and 67 different county government structures and everything that comes with it. So what we started for the first year was make sure that I used the bully pulpit of the Attorney General's office to remind all of humanity that reentry is unbelievably critical. I started working with county sheriffs, started working with local police departments. We started working with district attorneys and really putting out models that can work with regard to reentry. Right away, we met with every employer humanly possible that would meet with us to put it on their radar. We have a reentry task force that we run statewide, and so we're revamping that right now because it's not just about finding the jobs, it's about ensuring that all the services are there so that they can remain employed successfully.
Attorney General Jennings, with the acknowledgement that both of your states have passed clean slate legislation, what are you doing specifically in this effort?
Sure, and thank you for that question. I mean, much like Attorney General Sunday, I think we come at this maybe from a different place, but we come at this from our experiences. And I can tell you this, when I first ran for office ever in 2018, and I love the Attorney General's office, the work we do. We're also a district attorney's office. We have full criminal jurisdiction. And so this is the world I've come from throughout my career. But I grew up in a city that had a very high homicide rate. And we were known for that. And I grew up in a pretty poor neighborhood. And I was going down the wrong path. So I think maybe we share some of this in common, which is why we feel so strongly about reentry and second chances now. But when I decided to run, I had done a lot of work with a reentry program in Wilmington that was very successful. It was one of the first, the Achievement Center. I was on the board of the Achievement Center, and I met this young man named Corey Priest. Corey was doing work at the Achievement Center to go into the prison and find people who would sign up to go through a year-long reentry program through the center. And I got to be friends with Corey, and I said, Corey, you're inspirational. He spent 2 years in jail for trafficking in drugs. And he was a pretty successful drug trafficker. He also is a really successful human. So when he came out, he said, never again. And he went to work to help other humans who had potential. And so when I ran for office and won and was sworn in 2019, I said to Corey, hey, you want to work in the Department of Justice? He said, wait a second, Kathy, you want me to work in the office with the prosecutor who put me in jail? And I said, yeah, Corey, that's exactly what I want you to do. He has just been an inspiration throughout our office and really throughout the state. If you go anywhere in the state of Delaware and you say, do you know Corey Priest? Yeah, I know Corey Priest. He's amazing. He is now the head of our community program, and he is statewide. He runs programs like the Group Violence Intervention Program, where the highest risk youth in our state, the people doing the shooting and getting shot, and he is turning their lives around. And he is working on every reentry program you can imagine. We have reduced recidivism in our state through reentry programs as well as through second chances in the legislation that got passed in my first year in office. That was one of our top priorities, was second chances. We have reduced recidivism by 60%. And at the same time, as AG Sunday said, the jail population is down. It's down in Delaware by 30%. Yeah, it's amazing. And our violent crime rate, our gun violent crime rate in particular, is down by 50% over several years. Those are the metrics, I think, that spell success. We have a method to help people out, to get people to work. It includes expungement fairs, which we've done with JP Morgan Chase.
Can you explain a little bit more about what happens at those fairs?
Yeah, I would love to. So I believe in public-private partnerships. I'm sure you two do as well. And so, and I know JP Morgan Chase believes deeply in second chances. And so at the 76ers Stadium in Wilmington, we have done expungement fairs. What that means is, because Delaware is a small state, it's I call it one-stop shopping. You can walk through the doors. You can find out what your criminal record is. You can find out if you qualify for a pardon or an expungement. The public defender's office is there. They represent people who walk through those doors and do the paperwork necessary to start the process. And by the time that ends, people are well on their way to the success we'd like to see. We've even paired those reentry, the expungement fairs with Amazon with job fairs. So with Amazon, they had a job fair in the same place as that same type of expungement fair. So people could actually apply the same day for a job at Amazon. And so it's that kind of work that I think we all need to be doing. And it's not easy work, but it is really bearing fruit. So that's what we do at expungement fairs.
Can you both speak to, because you've had such success in your states through your own efforts, but also those teams that you've been working with, for the folks in the room who want to go back to their own states and say, look at this data, look what they're doing in Delaware and Pennsylvania, what do they need to do back home to replicate some of these results?
Well, I would start by saying that every state is different in the legal structure of the state. So some things work in some places, they may not work in others. And one of the most important parts of this that we discovered was the coalition building aspect, because, you know, looking at reentry and second chance hiring, you can't view it in its own silo. You have to collaborate with others on the wraparound services for reentrants. You have to talk about the mental health crisis that's happening all throughout this country, and how you're going to make sure you have those services available. There might be individuals who have been incarcerated for years that were in the throes of substance abuse when they initially became incarcerated. And so you want to make sure you have that, those services set up and ready to roll. And that was the beauty of our Reentry Opportunity Center, because it not only prepared them for when they ultimately left prison, but they were always available for them to come back to in the event that they had an issue that would come up. And so that's unbelievably important. But the coalition building is huge. Let me give you another example. So we recently kicked off an initiative in Pennsylvania where a local transit company, Red Rabbit Transit, they put together a program where they have vans that go around and they pick up individuals that are reentrants for second and third shift work. So they take them to the location of their employment, they bring them home, and that is so unbelievably crucial because, you know, if you can't get to work, you're not going to have a job. And so it's all these little things that come along with it, and that's where the coalition really comes into play. So I would recommend that you sit down, find as many people as humanly possible that are willing to be part of the team, and just get to work and find ways to get people jobs.
There are so many competing priorities at the state level. How do you get people to prioritize this?
We get people to prioritize it because it works. And once they start to dive into the data, the numbers, and the reality that you can lower violent crime at the same time you're lowering the back to prison rate, at the same time that you are making sure that the right people are in prison, truly violent offenders, people who should be there, who are dangerous to others, and that there are people who can be safely treated on the outside. And so, you know, when I first ran for office, I remember a very smart young woman who was sitting in the front row at a forum I was debating in, I guess, and she said, well, how are you ever going to measure success? And I said, well, there's those three metrics, but there's also the number of people who are buying in to second chances, who believe in second chances. And that requires each of us in our busy jobs to be the ambassadors for it. And so I remember when people couldn't get jobs, like at a McDonald's, because they had a criminal record. I remember when people were going through the endless cycle of fines and fees. They can't pay the fines, they can't pay the fees, so they get a warrant out for them, and they're back in jail. Well, they're not going to pay the fines and fees, so can't we change the system? And so there's just this ever-expanding effort to recognize the barriers, and for people who truly want to be able to take care of their families, themselves, live fulfilling lives, we owe it to them to remove the barriers that are making no sense. Fines and fees are not making us safer if people can't pay them, right? And so that's an easy example, but it's just one example of many things that we, in our busy lives, as you said, because right now we are extremely busy, and we are a prosecutor's office, but it made sense to focus on this. And I have to say, we're going to talk about policy in a second, but it's one thing to change policies, which we can each do within our offices. It's another to change culture. And so when Corey Priest started to work in the office, he was sitting right in the middle of the criminal division in our office. And he went over to his prosecutor, and he sat down with him, and he said, thank you. He said, I learned so much, and I hope we get to be friends. And then he started to recruit young, sort of new prosecutors right out of law school and said, come with me. We're going to go to a job fair in our largest city. Come with me. We are going to go to a park where we have a back-to-school fair, and we hand out hundreds of school bags to kids. We get their hair cut. We do whatever. And the younger prosecutors loved it. They had never experienced this. They just figured they'd be spending their life in a courtroom, which is important. Justice is important, accountability is important, and keeping the public safe is incredibly important. It will always be number one. But changing that culture in the office has been remarkable. And right now, I can tell you people in our office are very different in their perspectives from the way that they used to be, because they didn't want to meet people out there. They didn't know what that meant. It wasn't part of the rubric of what their job is, when in fact, it's one of the biggest parts of their job.
I'm glad you mentioned sort of being an ambassador in your own workplace. And this came up, I know, a bit on one of the previous panels about, you know, you can probably get a lot of people on board with nonviolent drug offenders and giving them second chances. But when it comes to people who have committed violent crimes or gone to prison for other crimes, it can be potentially more challenging. Attorney General Sunday, what do you say when you're talking to employers specifically about the importance of second chances, particularly across the broad spectrum of returning citizens?
So a couple things. Number one, the data is overwhelming that when people become employed after they leave prison, the odds of them committing additional crimes goes down drastically. So number one, if you care about your community being safe, this is super important. Number two, as employer, a lot of employers need to find employees. Like it's just they can't find people to do the jobs. And when you go to them and explain to them, number one, this is good for society. Number two, anecdotally, and I know there's data coming in now, but the odds of individuals leaving the job goes down drastically when you hire people that are coming out of prison. And so, you know, you're impacting the bottom line of your company by hiring people that are more likely to stay employed. I also want to make a comment real quick, and this is that, you know, as we talk about issues like this, and I thank you for covering this, and I thank everyone for putting this on today, but, you know, this is about accountability and redemption. It's about both. You are holding people accountable for the crimes that they've committed, but at the same time, you are recognizing the critical nature of redemption on society, not only on their lives, but on our communities. And so there is no world that exists where initiatives like this, you know, shouldn't be accepted. I mean, I've spoken to every single nook and cranny of the political spectrum on this, and accountability and redemption resonates with every single human. And if it doesn't, well, you know, but for most people it does. And so that being said, when you explain it to people, when you connect individuals that have succeeded in this place, when you bring employers in to say, listen, this guy's worked for me for 30 years, and you know what? He did an armed robbery 30 years ago when he was 19, and now he's one of my best employees. Like, that's what you want to hear. And so this isn't, for some people, they think it's like, hey, is this a get out of jail free card? The answer is no. This person, they were held accountable, they served their time, but now it's time for us to give them a chance to not only be where they were before, but to be even better.
Wrapping up, I know that we are in the nation's capital, so we have to talk a bit about federal policy. And I know that you led a coalition of 36 state attorneys general urging Congress to pass the Workforce Reentry Act. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, where that effort stands, and also what do we need at the federal level to help move forward some of the policies that y'all are doing at the state level?
I'll be brief about this. I'm sure you want to chime in, but very simply, you know, be it a county, be it a state, people have different levels of expertise on these issues. And the purpose of this act is to provide the technical support, to provide the funding, and put everyone sort of in an even place to be able to start enacting these initiatives. And so that's why I'm so supportive of this. And my hope is that that bill gets passed. I think it's sitting in limbo land right now. I'm not sure if people could agree to name a bridge at the moment, but right now it's sitting there. My hope is that it does get through. And so, but that's super important. I mean, you know, you've maybe, and I'm not sure in Delaware, but in Pennsylvania, you might have a couple counties where they're just crushing it. They have all kinds of reentry initiatives, and you might go 2 counties over, and they're like, "What is reentry?" And so we want to make sure that it's an even playing field and everyone has the same opportunities.
Attorney General Jennings, what do you need from the federal level to help your work expand, improve, be replicated in other states?
Well, we could be here all day, and I know we're not going to be able to do that. But I support what Attorney General Sunday said. I know one of our senators, Lisa Rochester, may be one of the sponsors of the bill, but I know she supports it, and I support it. I believe that if we're talking about reentry and second chances, that the federal government should be institutionalizing that as a philosophy. Just like Corey Priest, I have a friend who also went to jail for drug dealing. He went to federal prison, and he was in there for a long time. He came out, he was raising his family in Wilmington when his son was shot and killed on the front porch of his home. That's how I met Daryl. Daryl turned his life around. He said, never again, this is horrible. I want the person who shot and killed my son to be held accountable, and he was. But he said, I just want to be part of the solution. And so Daryl partnered with the University of Delaware, where he is to this day, working on direct community involvement for gun violence intervention in our largest city and in our state. He's a terrific asset for the state, but Daryl wasn't getting a pardon. We can argue about who gets a pardon in this country right now, but what I can say is Daryl should have gotten a pardon. I got him a lawyer at Morgan Lewis who worked for free for Daryl. It took years and years and years. And finally, on our former president's last day, he signed a pardon for Daryl Chambers. It shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be for the people who really need it to get a second chance. And so I don't know that that's a new law. It just might be a new philosophy. But we all have to get around on the same message, and that is second chances works. And so I support it fully. I really, really would like to see our federal government fully support it as well. And get more Daryl Chambers back to work.
I think that I wish there was a way that, so I used to serve on the state sentencing commission in Pennsylvania, and we were able to really, move mountains with data. And I feel like this is an area where we don't have as much data as I would like to see, in particular on the success rate of individuals that are hired. And I think that would be helpful if there was some initiative or some federal program that assisted with that. Because then when we went to employers, we could say, listen, the turnover rate is much lower for these individuals. I know that anecdotally that's what we hear. I know there are some studies that have shown that. I think you and I were just looking at one that said like 12%.
I think that data came from SHRM, if I'm not mistaken. Wonderful.
And so I think that would be really helpful for employers. I know sometimes there's concerns from employers about liability. And I don't know if we should take a look at some different legal options to maybe make that a little easier potentially. But I just think it's such an overall win for society that we have to do everything we can to make sure that it's successful.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your expertise and for your ongoing efforts. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.